Welcome to Selling in the Age of AI.
Yeah, this is good stuff. So,
Must-listen podcast for sales professionals who lean into technology without leaning on it. Dive into the future of sales with your host, the dynamic and inspiring Frank Somma, renowned keynote speaker, best-selling author, seminar leader, and business coach. Get ready for game-changing insights and strategies that value technology but place humanity at the top of the sales pyramid.
Welcome everyone to Selling in the Age of AI. I'm Frank Somma, and my guest today, by way of the UK, is my friend Anthony Stears, aka the Telephone Assassin. Man, I want to be the Telephone Assassin. That's such a good name. I met Anthony way back in March of 2020 when he presented at a conference that I'd attended. And I was blown away. To this day, I quote Anthony in every keynote and workshop I offer. I have a slide that says, email will get it off your desk, but it won't get it done. And I credit Anthony. He's right. I can cite a study, matter of fact, I'll do this later. I'll cite a study by Vanessa Bonds from Cornell University that bears out what Anthony already knew. At the conference, his skills and information was so spot on, I made sure to peel him away from the others and get to know him a bit better. And what I found was a deep, deep understanding of interpersonal skills, marketing, and sales. The Telephone Assassin's name came from Anthony's early days, I think, when he was a telemarketer for hire for various companies. Of course, he worked for half a dozen companies at the same time, still managed to find one day a week to get out on the links and golf. But obviously, if Anthony is his own product, you can't scale too well that way. So he created a wonderful online university. As I recall, you consulted with a master practitioner of NLP, something you and I have in common. I am an NLP practitioner. And today, Anthony does just that. He does seminars and workshops and has his online university. Welcome, Anthony. I'm so thrilled that you agreed to be on with us.
oh, Frank, I was so delighted when I saw your message. And like you say, I can remember that conference. We were in Phoenix. I think downstairs was the meeting of the World Health Organization, who were deciding to pretty much lock the world down, weren't they? It was the last business trip we did for a little while, that's for sure.
It was. I think it was like the 9th or 10th of March or something, 11th, something like that when we left. It was right as COVID was shutting everything down. And we all came home healthy, knock wood.
Absolutely. But yeah, I kind of remember we were chatting, or it may have been in my talk, because I often get asked, I obviously help people with conversations, and people often jump to the assumption, well, is this just B2B? Or do you do like B2C as well? And I ended up kind of framing it that I kind of do both. It's all about H to H. It was just human to human. It doesn't matter if you're sat at home or in a business. You still think in the same way. Your values still work in exactly the same way. And I think I remember I was either saying it to you, or it was after I'd come off stage. You just went, "I've got a great book for you," and you handed me your book with the P2P, and it was just like brilliant. And I knew that straight away we were kind of on that same wavelength. And as technology seems to be advancing, our communication skills seem to be getting distracted and weakened, and particularly in the UK, there's a social anxiety, a fear of talking to people on the phone, particularly with the younger generations, and it's in the news and everything. So it's we need to really bang the drum. I think that conversation. I always say that every conversation I have, there's an opportunity in it somewhere. Okay, right. It's not always for me, which is why we don't usually notice it. But the more people you talk to, the more opportunities you seem to find. And in business, that's what makes it interesting and keeps you going.
And it's interesting that there's so much news about the tech, right? Artificial intelligence. I read an article yesterday that said that 49% of a CEO's job can be done better by artificial intelligence. So I'm wondering, in your experience and all the people you're training and all the companies that, you consult for now, what is your experience in terms of AI's usefulness versus, what you said, H to H, the human connection?
Yeah. I'm usually a little bit of a late adopter with technology. I like to sort of see what other people thinking and doing and what have you first. There's been some interesting AI speakers who I've had great chats with, and I remember in the early days being at a conference where somebody put their hand up to an AI speaker and said, "Well, a robot's going to steal my job, or AI is going to steal my job," and the speaker turned around and said, "Look, AI is not going to steal your job, but somebody using it probably will." Um, and that was then the moment where I thought actually it's not about creating these robots and becoming lazy and getting them to do everything. It's about utilizing them for the things that take us a lot of time or that we struggle with. But then there's another speaker, a guy called Leon Bamford, and he talked about weighing up the risk of what you're producing with AI being wrong. Okay. If it's just some marketing stuff or if it's not something not too important, then you can use a bit of AI and a little scan read over it. You'll probably get away with it. Okay. If you want it to summarize a very detailed scientific report, okay, and you want it to summarize for you, you don't know what bits it's discounted. So if you only read the summary and not the full report, then you could go into a board meeting looking like an absolute idiot when they bring up a topic that your AI decided wasn't relevant enough to put it in the top 5 things to look out for in the report, if that makes sense. So for me, technology is amazing. It's doing some really cool stuff. It's getting stuff wrong too. And I think in my world, there is a couple of elements of AI that I think are going to transform things and make our salespeople much better.
Okay.
And one of them is that kind of the note taker. So people have various different names of these different technologies that you can have listening on your calls and on Zooms and things like that. Um, these are brilliant. Not, if I'm honest with you, there are some CRM systems that use it and they really try to almost over analyze what's happened. They'll talk about who did most of the speaking, how many open
Right.
questions were asked, all this kind of stuff. Yeah, I've asked a few of them to run a couple of linguistic challenges where you say the same sentence but sort of 5 or 6 different ways and you see if AI actually can pick up on it. And it doesn't seem to actually understand the emotion or the feeling behind
Okay.
words. So it's not very good at that quite yet. But from a salesperson's point of view, a lot of us in sales, we're talkers, we're not writers. Okay, we're not great at admin typically. I'm dyslexic, so I struggle when it comes to lots of text and reading and that kind of stuff anyway, or I'm quite slow at it. So what I tend to find is the thing that lets most salespeople down is a lack of notes and information about previous conversations in their CRM system.
Okay.
Okay, because it's the little nuggets that you get in those conversations that when you start to recount them, you know the little details of that person, it helps you to build rapport, stronger relationships with people, builds trust, it shows you listen.
Sure.
Just silly things. If for example, you're talking to if we jumped on this call today and I could hear a dog barking in the background, for
Hmm.
example, and I said, oh, who's that? Who can I hear in the background? And you'll say, oh, sorry, that's Benji. He's just come back for his walk. He'll quieten down in a minute. Sorry, he'll be quiet. Okay. I'll make a note. You've got a dog called Benji. Right, because if I phone again and I can hear a dog barking, I'll say, "Hey Frank, how are you doing? Oh, is that Benji I can hear in the background?" And I could kind of break the ice using
Hmm.
just a little detail from our previous conversation. Okay. And as salespeople, we're not always great at updating our CRM system. Whereas if we had a note taker who listened into everything and
Wow.
could then summarize the key actions, takeaways, and things like that for us, or even just a transcript of the call, or even a recording of that call if we wanted to, you could then store that in your CRM system. Okay. And AI is getting very clever now because it will actually there's some systems that will hold the audio recording, and you could say, "Take me to the bit where I say this," and it will take you directly to that 10 seconds beforehand,
Wow.
and you can listen to it back live. Okay, so I think
Hmm.
if you lean into technology in that way, if you're slower and not so good at making lots of notes, and realize that actually it can help you because information is ammunition, basically, then that's one of the sort of AI tools that I would encourage I tend to trying to encourage more people to use that I'm working with. But
Wow.
I see people getting very distracted with the AI technology and creating boxes, basically creating marketing stunt things where they're trying to create a action figure of themselves in a box.
Right,
And you
right.
kind of go, yeah, that's kind of quite cool, but unless you're designing product, it seems fun at the moment. I think people once people realize the elements of their life where it will make their lives easier and they just start using it for that, it will make a big difference. I think at the moment, I don't know. I'm from a slightly older generation as well, Frank. I remember Terminator 2. I know where this is going, so I don't want to. I don't want to rely on technology too much. That's for sure.
I'll be back.
Exactly,
Oh, that's
exactly.
fabulous.
So,
But
but
what a
once they
great point.
realize we are idiots, and to protect us, they actually need to
Right.
protect us from ourselves, then we're in trouble. So,
Yes. That really is a strong point, though. The idea that I can utilize the technology to do the things that I'm not so great at, which typically is administrative stuff. And if I'm talking to you and I'm taking notes at the same time, I'm often missing the next sentence while I'm writing about the last one.
absolutely, absolutely. It's hard to hard to listen and write and
Mhm.
transcribe. I have like a day book in front of me, so I sort of jot down words that people say,
Hmm.
and then things that pop into my head that I think I want to ask, but I need to stay tuned into the conversation. And this is where like if you fully tune in to the conversation being said, then when you listen, and like I say, and properly tune into what they're saying, I always think the right thing to say next just tends to pop into your head.
Hmm.
Either you react to what they're kind of saying, or you're curious and want to know more, or
Oh, wait,
you're
wait, wait.
confused and
Does
you want
it?
clarification.
But does it or does it for you? So you've got a lot more experience in training people than I'll ever have. And that I want to understand that point. Is this something now, let me back up. I don't call it a natural. I believe that if I took a little 6-month-old baby and parked them into your life
Mhm.
and let them be raised and have every experience that you ever had, they would come out with your skills. So I don't believe that it's a natural. I believe that it's
Mhm.
environmental. That's my own personal belief. Having
Yep.
said that, though, you said, all right, so then, the next logical thing will pop into your head based on your curiosity, etc. What do you find with people that you're training? Is that something that's instinctive for them? And how do you teach that portion of it so that they are ready with the next remark or question?
Well, typically, if you're in sales, for example, you are usually given a objection handling document. If they say this, then you say that. Basically, if they put up this barrier, this is how you get round it.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I don't really like that because technically, overcoming objections is arguing. Really, you're basically telling somebody why the reason they've given you for not wanting to do something isn't good enough.
Okay.
Okay. So if you overcome the objection head on, you basically win the argument, which makes them feel like you're either more in control of the conversation than they are, or that you're twisting their words.
Okay.
Okay. Either way, they don't really like it. So direct objection handling is the thing that you try and avoid. Um, but what I tend to teach people more than anything else in sales is manners and patience.
Mhm.
Etiquette is vital, and this is kind of what's I potentially think is lacking in or that was forced upon us with COVID, where we were all locked down. Um, there was kids that basically were shut in their rooms and put on screens and weren't in social environments where you have to learn manners. That's the whole thing about being out and being social when you're at school is you learn that if you're nice and kind, then you have friends and people want to play with you. If you're mean and don't listen and what have you, and you steal stuff, then you get told off and you have to go and sit in the corner, and you start to learn the social etiquette that makes your life easier.
Okay.
Okay. And that's just something that when you get into sales, quite often there's the pressure of a target.
Okay.
And that sometimes means that common sense and common courtesy aren't that common because you're too busy trying to chase your next sale. And just by getting people to slow down and realize that using really good manners means that you don't burn through data or leads or inquiries by trying to force a conversation with somebody. Okay. You realize that treading carefully at the very beginning and seeing if there's a better time to speak to them, as far as I'm concerned in sales, it will always be a numbers game. Okay. But I don't think it's
Sure.
about overcoming objections or convincing people to buy. It's more about capitalizing on the conversations people are ready to have. If you force a conversation and you're busy or distracted, you're going to tell me no, or to email you, or to go away. Okay. So by giving people a bit of etiquette and showing them how to check that people are ready to engage at the beginning of the conversation means that people relax more. Once somebody goes, oh yeah, go on, Anthony, I've got a few minutes now. What is it you wanted to talk about? All of a sudden I can I can breathe out. Okay. Then I can talk. Whereas normally we phone up quite nervous. If we're given a script, we literally go, hello there, Frank. This is my name and this is my company. And here's a feature followed by a benefit and another feature followed by another benefit. And in the hope that if you haven't hung up by the time I finish speaking, there's a really small chance that you might be interested in a quick meeting. And you get that kind of out of breath, and I joke, I call that premature elaboration. Okay, it's that overexcited or desperate salesperson who just can't hold on to their pitch. They just blurt it down the phone to whoever answers. Whereas if you slow it down, you do a bit of research first, you double check that when I phone you that actually you've got a few minutes to chat quickly, then actually I can have quite a nice conversation with you. Okay. The next thing I then teach them as part of their manners is that when you do outreach, I use an analogy that it should feel like you're dropping off a pizza menu. Okay. We all get takeaway menus kind of put through our letterboxes, and land on our doormat. But what we don't get is them knocking on your door. I mean, could you imagine that, Frank? If you heard a little knock at the door, you've opened your front door, and I was stood there going, hi there, Domino's, can I take your order? I'm stood there with a pen and a pad, right? Now, don't get me wrong. Do that on a Friday and Saturday night, and only knock on the houses that are playing music and having a party. You'd probably sell a few pizzas.
Yeah.
But let's be honest with you. On a Tuesday morning at 10:30, if you knocked on somebody's door, the best you could hope for is they're going to slam the door in your face because they're going to think it's rather intrusive. So that analogy is all I'm saying is that when you reach out, it should feel like you're trying to create awareness, not take an order. Okay, so in the context of what I do and what you do, so you're a podcast host, right? So if I wanted to reach out to you, okay, once you've given me permission to speak, I'd be saying, as I mentioned, Frank, my name's Anthony Stears. I'm actually known as the telephone assassin, but don't worry, it's not as aggressive as it sounds. Okay, that usually provokes I got a smile from you there. I can see you at the moment. Okay, it's not as aggressive as it sounds. Okay, then I'd say I'm considered a conversational strategist and an expert speaker, but I often get invited onto podcasts. I just wanted to reach out. I'm guessing you're probably not looking for podcast guests right now. Okay, so all I'm doing is I'm saying I want to introduce.
Why do you lead with the negative?
Well, what I tend to do is I tell you what I do, but I follow it up with the instant assumption that the timing is probably not right for you right now. And that takes all of the pressure out of it from you.
Taking the objection away from me.
Well, it tells you that, exactly. The most common objection normally is when you're prospecting, oh, yeah, sorry, we're not looking for that at the moment. Okay, that's a polite way of getting rid of you. All right. So if you lead and say, well, this is what I do, but I'm guessing you're not looking right now, it's so polite. And what people tend to do is they tend to confirm that you're correct and then justify it. So they'll say something like, oh, yes, you're right, Anthony. I'm not looking for guests at the moment. I tend to book 3 months in advance, and I've got another month or two before I'm going to book the next batch. Yeah. Or if I was asking about training, for example, I do a lot of internal training. They'll say, oh, yeah, you're right. We're not looking at training right now because we've got a program that runs till the end of the year. Okay, so what they'll do is they'll kind of confirm that they've got a potential future need for my services and give me a time frame of when is likely I should be getting back in touch. Okay, so by me telling you that I'm not expecting you want to buy from me right now and you saying, yeah, you're right, I don't. Okay, it means that because I've put it on the table and it's safe to talk about, we can move on from that. Okay. Because now I know I'm not going to sell to you. I can then turn around to you and say, I've got to ask though, Frank, what sort of guests do you typically like? I've listened to a few of your recent ones, but yeah, are there any topics that you're particularly interested in? Is there anything, what sort of style do you tend to do them in? All right. And so I might ask a couple of questions in order to get you to tell me a bit more about what it is I'm interested in. Okay. But typically, all I'm doing when I'm getting them to drop off their pizza menu, I use that for the analogy of how it feels.
Yeah.
But what I would typically say and be dropping off is I'd be saying, well, I tell you what, Frank, I'll get back in touch in 2 months' time, like you suggested. But in the meantime, could I just send 2 mini 1-page case studies, just some feedback I've had from other podcasts I've done recently, just so you can see what they say about me? Okay. And that is all I want to send you. All right. I don't want to send you my prices, links to my website. I just want you to know what my clients say about me because you're going to believe them far more than you're going to believe what I say about me. Okay. And that's my whole thing, really. When it comes to sales, it doesn't matter if you're a lawyer or a landscaper, the principles work in exactly the same way. Okay. In my mind, anyway, I think the best way to perfect your pitch is basically to share a success story somebody can relate to. Okay. What most salespeople tend to do is name drop their biggest client, which
Mhm.
does impress for about a second, but then it can intimidate people into thinking, well, oh God, well, if you've done a project that big, you're probably not interested in working with me. Okay. So if you did write down that share success stories people can relate to, underline the word relate because it's the most
Yeah.
important word in that whole sentence. And all of a sudden, selling is not really an uncomfortable thing to do anymore because you don't have to tell people how good you are. You should have a credibility library in your back pocket
Mm.
of people who think you're great that hopefully you can match up with their industry, their job title, or the outcomes they're looking to achieve from working with you.
Wow. So I want to unpack some of this going back. I jotted down a couple of notes because I was like, I mean, that was in that 10 minutes, that was a master class of selling. But, a couple, I want to go back to objection handling. Um, and then I want to go mostly back to the mood that you set. So when you say to somebody, "Hey Frank, I see you've got this podcast. You're probably not looking for guests right now."
Mhm.
And you take that, you've basically taken the fire away.
Yeah,
Now we can calmly speak. But I think, Anthony, to get there, you've got to be confident enough. So what happens to salespeople, right, is they're desperate, as you said before. They've got a
yeah,
target, they've got to hit it. So they're fire hosing information at people and the hopes that they'll land something. And how can they get that feeling of confidence? Because you have to have confidence. Say you're probably not looking for somebody right now.
yeah,
Understanding it, I'm dropping off the pizza menu, and it's a longer
yeah,
term play till you order a pizza.
mhm,
So
yeah, yeah.
how do you bridge the gap
I,
and build that
you, I,
confidence to be able to do that calmly?
um, I basically explain that and slow down the process. Okay. There's three things you want to do in a conversation. You have to do them in the right order if you want somebody to do something.
Okay.
Okay. So the first thing you need to do is you need to get them to like you. Okay. If they don't like you, they're not going to listen to you. Okay. Or they're going to challenge you or get out of the conversation or be awkward or something like that. So, best way to do that is manners, is a really good way of showing etiquette, and research. The more you know about somebody, the easier it is to flatter them, basically. Flattery works wonders on any sex, any age of person. The more you can tell them about themselves without going creepy and too personal, the more it shows they're not just a name and a number on a list.
Right.
Okay, but basically, you want them to like you enough to get them to listen, or more
Mm.
importantly, not decide they dislike you and then become evasive, combative, that kind
Right.
of thing. Right. So that's it. Rapport. Get them to like you. Middle part of the conversation is you want to establish your credibility. All right. You want to start to build trust with people. Okay. And the only way to do that in a really short space of time is to give them references of other people like them so that they can see what they say about you.
Okay.
Okay. So that's what I mean about sharing success stories you can
Mhm.
relate to. And you can do it really fast with people on the telephone. And it gives you something interesting to send them rather than sending them a brochure that's all about you that they don't care about.
Mhm.
Okay. The third phase, so you basically got rapport, they need to like you enough to listen, establish a credibility so they know they can trust you.
Sure.
Then what you want to do is create urgency or an easy next step. Okay. So this is where I usually get my clients to position it as a test drive. So we would say to a client, hey, you're probably not ready for this right now. Obviously, let me know when's a better time to get back in touch. In the meantime, would love to give you a little test drive and kind of show you how it works. All right. And for some people, that would be so as a speaker, I might send somebody a free copy of my book. Okay, I might send them a show reel of me of some highlights of me speaking. I might even send them footage of me doing a full keynote so they could see me speak, or links to an article or a podcast. There's a variety of different things that I could link them to or give them that could give them some value and a kind of a flavor of what I'm like.
Right.
Okay. If somebody I'm talking to about training and they're a bit dubious of whether or not I've worked in their industry before, or if their people will gel with me, because occasionally I get people who go, oh, our team are a bit weird, they're all like this and we're in this little niche type of thing, and I might say, well, why don't I do a mini 45-minute online session, little taster session, I'll troubleshoot some issues, and off the back of that you can ask them if they could see us doing something a bit
Right.
deeper, and then we could look at training. So I can kind of stepping stone them towards getting the outcome of, hopefully, basically what I want to do is help them to buy. Right, that's my whole principle. I'm not trying to sell to them and convince them and talk them into it. I just love to be able to show them some value so that they want more. And that's the kind of process. Once you get people to realize that are nervous, all I have to do to begin with is get them to like me. Right, don't worry about the other two stages, because if you can't get them to like you, establishing credibility and creating urgency is almost impossible. All right, so learn to get some manners and how to start off your call and frame it well, that doesn't feel like you're ambushing them on the telephone. Okay.
So go
One.
back to that a minute, Ant. Go back to this idea. I'm a little baby salesperson. I just got started, and I am desperate to find business. How
Okay.
do I? Can you teach me to not convey desperation? Can you teach me to convey confidence, even though I have nothing working and I really need you to answer the phone and buy from
You
me?
really need to be, so sometimes people sometimes need to relax, and you can often hear it in their voice, and that's when
Right.
sometimes I say to them, you need to go, for some people you need to pump them up and they need to get energized to get focused on the phone.
Mm,
Other people need to go and have a cup of tea and sit in the corner and do some
okay.
deep breaths and concentrate. Other people want to sit and do some research, so they've got 5 minutes worth of knowledge going in that they think they can use on the telephone. Okay. But if somebody was really nervous, then the first thing that I would get them to do is to phone some existing customers. Okay. And so get permission from their account managers or your boss, but phone some existing customers and say, hey, my name's Anthony. I'm pretty new to the business. I'm going to start reaching out to some potential prospects soon, but I'd like to know, what is it you love about our company? What is it we do really well? And you should go and talk to some of your existing customers and find out what it is they love about you, and pretty much gather up some fresh new testimonials from them.
Wow, that's
Okay.
great.
That will infuse you and inspire you to realize that your company makes a massive difference and a big impact to your clients. Okay. You now need to go and share that story and that passion that that client just told you with somebody else in their industry.
Okay.
And that's what I would get you to start off by doing, is go and find 5 people in that same industry and say, hey, Johnny, you're probably happy with who you're using for this particular thing at the moment, but another HR director, Frank Somma over here from one of your competitors I've been working with recently, I thought you might be interested to see what he's saying about me. Could I send you a one-pager and you can have a little look at it? And if at some point you'd like a little test drive or have a coffee, please let me know. All right.
Wow.
There's no pressure in that. All I would target him to do is drop off his first 10 pizza menus. Because I can guarantee, if you can drop off 10 pizza menus to the right people in the right industry, okay, it doesn't take long before one of them goes, well, actually, yeah, we have had some issues with this. And, oh, I didn't know we could do that. Oh, God, yeah, we're coming up for
Oh, that's really
reviewing
smart.
suppliers soon. Okay. And that's what I mean about dropping off your pizza menu.
Right.
You should be sharing success stories people can relate to, not trying to pump them with marketing stuff and special offers. And obviously, if you're in like a B2C space, then special offers and promotions can catch the consumer's eye. But in the B2B space, it's people buy people.
Yeah.
Okay. If you phone somebody up and go, hey, we've got a client just like you who thinks we're amazing, think you might want to have a look at what they say about us. yeah, if you'd ever like to come for a sample or a demo or whatever it is, insert whatever's appropriate, please let us know. My boss has asked me to. In fact, you could even ham it up and say, I'm so sorry, Frank, but one of our directors has specifically asked me to reach out to you because he noticed you're a local insert recruitment company. Okay. We've done some great work from Assassin Recruiters just up the road from you recently. I thought you might be interested to have a look. My director just wanted to offer you a coffee at some point or a little lunch chat because he'd love to talk to you about what we've done and if we might be able to do the same for you guys. Right.
You know,
And
and what you
that
do
way,
is so conversational and so calm, and you've come back to the notion of being polite and having manners. And I think that's part of, the persona, right? You want to be able to take your time and really respect the other person's time. And what you said before about, making sure that they're ready to receive the information. And that's super important. I think that takes confidence in calling existing clients is just a gem and a half. I mean, that's a great way to get started. Can you go
well,
back to the objection handling?
even the marketing department will love them and that
Yeah,
exercise because they then get a fresh load of testimonials that they can slap all over social media or do in direct
absolutely.
campaigns. Because obviously you can do an email version of that campaign. Please don't tell anybody I said that, being the telephone assassin, but you know what I mean.
Stop it. I'm gonna go get my garlic necklace
Yeah,
and hold up a burning
absolutely.
cross on you.
But you picked up on the fact that I sort of led with that common objection of the you're probably not looking right now.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
mean, to be fair, we're not saying to people that email and text is useless. What we're saying is that the hierarchy of communication
Mhm.
is be face to face with someone. If you can't do that, be on the telephone. If you can't do that, send an
Mm.
email. So
Yeah.
that's the hierarchy. The study I was
Yeah.
referring to in the intro, Vanessa Bonds out of Cornell University. So
Hmm.
she sent people out with an ask.
Hmm.
And it was a small favor, right? And she said, okay, this group, do your ask via email, and this group, do your ask via telephone calls. And the telephone group outperformed the other group 66 to 33%. There was no contest. There was no
I
contest.
love it. I love it.
And yeah,
And
yeah, I use that slide a lot. And actually, before that slide comes up, you come up on my screen and it says,
yeah,
email, get it off your desk, but it won't get it done. Then I back you up with the Vanessa
yeah,
Bond study out of Cornell.
yeah.
But I want to be
But
fair to the folks that are listening. An email cadence in your marketing is super important. Sending out messages on time, using AI to investigate who your clients are, what they're about, effective A/B testing of an email message, see what gets opened, try different
yeah,
subject lines, and then follow up. And I think something, Anthony, that I'm pretty sure I learned from you is I often leave a message. So, Anthony, this is Frank. I'm sorry I didn't get a hold of you. I will reach out to you again next Friday. In the interim, I'll reach
yeah.
out to you next Friday at noon. In the interim, I'm going to send you an email in case it's easier for you to get back to me that way.
Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
now I'm
Perfect.
using
And
the email, but I'm also pre-warned you that I'm calling you next Friday at noon. And when I
yeah.
do that, if I remember you teaching me
Mhm.
well, I've done a couple of things. Number one, you might semi have listened and been expecting it, but no matter what, I've already fulfilled the first promise I've made to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're a man of your word. I like, and that last bit that you were referring to there is the last step in my process, which is
Okay.
called TFR, which is taking final responsibility.
Okay.
But you got to take final responsibility for the next time you're going to speak to somebody, not just the next action. So if you're having a conversation and you're agreeing to email them something, then tell them when the email is going to come over, but book in when you're going to have the call when they'll have had chance to review it and you can
Super
answer
important.
any final questions. Right? You don't want to cause what I like to call pipeline constipation by leaving the ball in their court, right?
Well, that's super important. I mean, so many people do that. They get an affirmative from a customer. And clients, okay, send me over XYZ. First of all, send me over usually means I'm never going to talk to you again.
Yeah.
But
It was a polite way of saying I'm too polite to hang up on you, but if I give you an email, will you go away?
right, exactly. So, I've sometimes I've overcome that by saying, well, yeah, no problem. We can send that over to you. I'm going to send it over with John. He's in your area on Tuesday at 12 o'clock.
Yep.
It's a 106 West Broadway, yes?
Yep.
So I'm going to take it to the next level. But what I think I wanted to go back to what's very important to me is you talked before about objection handling. And you said not to hit it head on,
Yeah.
but you still have to overcome the objection. So how do you teach folks not to be argumentative, but do they ignore the objection? Do they work around it?
So I usually say on a first call, your job is to collect up as many objections as you possibly can.
Okay.
Okay. And you need to make a note of them. Now, like I say, if you handle each objection head on as soon as they come up, technically you're just arguing with them and trying to justify why their reason is not good enough. Okay.
Right.
The reason you want to gather up. So if I was to reach out and go, hey, yeah, we're a local IT company, just want to have a little chat, and they go, oh, okay, well, we haven't got much budget at the moment, and our contract doesn't run up for another 3 months. Okay, so I'm thinking, okay, budget's a bit of an issue. 3 months left on their contract. I scribble them down. Yeah.
Right.
And they might even throw in, and I've worked with these guys for like 5 years now. Like I can't be bothered to move. Like, right. So there you go. I've got 3 key bits of information. Right. What you really want to do is I talked about sharing success stories people can relate to. So that was case studies, feedback from clients, and I mentioned that you can match industry. So here's other people in your industry that I've worked with. You can match job title, okay, but you can also match outcome, and sometimes you can even match initial objection handling. So, for example, if budget is one of the issues, okay, but you've worked with another client where cash flow was a bit of an issue and you did them a payment plan and you labeled that as hashtag payment plan at the bottom, all right, when somebody says to you, oh, well, we haven't got much budget, we're only a small company, you could say, oh, don't worry, well, look, here's another company we work with who had very bad cash flow issues. Look what they said about working with us. Yeah. And they might go, oh, Anthony was fantastic. And he agreed to spread the cost. And we did it quarterly rather than monthly. So it helped us with our contract, blah, 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 blah. Right. So I could then share a story of somebody else who had the same objection you had, but this story will tell you how we got round it. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's my client telling you how we got round it, not me telling you that you're wrong. Okay. And
Huge.
that's one of the things that you can kind of use it sticking with their incumbent supplier. So if they say, well, we've worked with them for 10 years. Okay. Well, if you've got clients who you've won recently or in the last few years who were previously with a client with their previous supplier for 10 plus years, I would say, yeah, incumbent 10 plus years, right, on it. So that I would say, well, here was somebody else who worked for over a decade with their supplier. And it was only when they got speaking to us that they realized we had a slightly fresher approach, or we had different technology, or we had different staff, or we had different levels of service, okay, that they didn't know were available or weren't available through their old supplier. So to overcome those objections, you gather them up, and you could even at the end of the conversation say, well, look, I'll tell you what, I'll leave you to it. I'll get back in touch next week when things have slowed down. But you've mentioned budget's a bit of an issue, and you've mentioned this. I've got 2 clients I've worked with where budget was an issue and where this was a factor. Can I just send you what they say about us now, just so you can have a little look, and then we'll chat next week once you've had a chance to have a little look at it.
That is
Yeah.
fantastic.
All I've then done is given you evidence of other people who used to think like you, but now have come around to our way of thinking and they've seen the benefits. So that's really how to do it. But with objection handling, that technique of assuming that they're not looking right now is almost leading with the most common objection. That's how I would kind of word that sort of strategy. But when I do it as a talk, I actually do it. It's referred to as inviting the elephant to dance. Okay, we've all heard, right? We've all heard
I
about
love it.
we've all heard about addressing the elephant in the room. You know that
Right.
awkward thing we're hoping that they don't say or that's going to come up, right? Well, rather than waiting for it to come up and trying to be prepared for it, right? If you invite the elephant to dance, you get to pick the music. All right, you can be armed and ready
Oh,
to
it's
say, hey,
brilliant.
last time we spoke, you told me that budget was a really big issue for you guys. Right? That's definitely the case, right? Brilliant. Well, look, I selected 3 case studies we've worked with recently where we've been able to do payment plans or we've been able to do a reduced version of this, but still give people great value. Can I just send them across just so you know it's worth at least considering us in the future?
Wow.
Yeah. So I think that's my approach to objection handling is kind of storytelling,
Mhm.
and
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 relating to something
manners are the
similar.
most disarming thing that you can use, and it's really hard to be rude to somebody who's being really polite to you. The ruder people are, the more polite I tend to go.
Right.
Okay, because it's really hard to be an asshole to somebody who's actually it's not their fault, and you're just they right. It's a bit like complaints lines, right? Whenever I have to work with teams who deal with complaints, Okay. Again, the main thing that I teach them is patience. I say, wait for them to say sorry. All right. Let them shout at you and rant and explain to them, yeah, I would be frustrated too. And right. And then let them get to the end. Because by the end of it, if you've listened to all of it, they'll say, look, I'm sorry. I know it wasn't you who did this. All right. Then they know you've listened. Then you can say to them, don't worry, Mr. Customer. I would feel exactly like that too. But I tell you what, I'm gonna get this fixed for you. Can you bear with? Can you do this for me? Can you do this? And I'd then try and fix it. Whereas if you got into a rant and telling me how rubbish our technology is and your coffee machine's broken again and it's all my fault because we supplied the coffee machine, right? If I jump in after 30 seconds and go, whoa, 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 sit down, Frank, calm down, just go and close the door properly. I think that's what's happened. Sometimes it gets a bit jammed, a coffee bean falls in there, it doesn't shut properly, and that's why it comes up with that error, right? You're then going to go, oh, well, right? And all of a sudden, you're not going to have felt heard. And sometimes you just got to slow people down. We're humans, we're emotional beings, right? You've got to go through those emotions with people with the like, trust, and urgency. Okay. You got to do them in the right order. Otherwise, it doesn't tend to work. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a build. And I think that's what salespeople now need to do more of is your job is to cultivate relationships. Okay. It is not to phone through massive databases and keep asking 100 people if they want to buy a widget, right? Because eventually somebody will say yes and I'll give you commission. It's not like that anymore, right?
Right.
And you can't afford to do it in a bad or rude way because if you phone the wrong person, if somebody tried to sell to you, Frank, and they were really rude and swore at you and actually were quite offended that you didn't want to talk to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got quite a following online. If you wanted to, you could name and shame them, right? And all of a sudden, they're going to have to create loads of positive marketing to bury the negative stuff that you're saying about them.
Right.
So you can't afford to do it badly. But I suppose bringing it back to modern day and the technology age, nowadays, most marketing campaigns are very trackable. You talked about using email campaigns. Definitely do email campaigns. I might be the telephone assassin, but I'm not an idiot. You can send 10,000 emails with a few clicks. You can only talk to one person at a time, right? You could broadcast to lots, obviously, but if you send out emails to the right kind of list and you're sending them good content, then the first people I would want to follow is anybody who's followed any of those links. Okay, they've obviously interested in what we've sent them. They've then gone to look at more on our website. I'd be phoning them up and wrapping it in customer service and saying, hey, Frank, you've been on our mailing list for quite a few months now. I see you followed that article we did recently. Can I ask, did you find it really useful? Was there anything you really liked about it? Are there any up and coming topics you're hoping we're going to cover? Right? All of a sudden I could start to get a friendly chat with you and start to nurture you a little bit. And you might then say, well, actually, yeah, we've got a project coming up, or, oh, yeah, well, been tasked to look into this thing at the moment. I'd be interested in that. And I might then be able to serve you up some content that's exactly what you're looking for. Or I might be able to tailor my proposition to hit that sweet spot that you're trying to fulfill at the moment. So yeah, as you can tell, I get quite enthusiastic
I
about it,
love
and
it.
I know people are scared, and they say, well, you can do it. You're outgoing, and you've kind of like the reason I got good on the phone. So this is a tiny little sort of origin story, and I'll keep it short. Is that when I first left school, my first job, I went into real estate or estate agency over here, so selling houses and property. Okay. Typically, you tend to find that they're quite young working in this industry. And I like to think, Frank, and hopefully you can attest to this, I look quite youthful. And back in the day, I looked really young when I was an estate agent.
Sure.
And I remember I'd worked my way up, I'd broken all of the sales records, and I'd been with the company for like 3+ years. And I got promoted to being a valuer. Okay. And I got to value a house in the town, the really posh town of Ascot. Okay, so in the UK, this is where the Royal Racecourse is. Ascot is very posh. And I remember valuing this house. It was like £750,000. It was the biggest one that I'd valued. And I did a pretty good job. And I'll be honest, as I drove onto their drive, they had an on and off drive. And as I was driving on in my new Astra, okay, that I was very happy with, the owner of my competitor was driving off on his Jaguar. Okay, so I'm feeling a little bit intimidated.
Sure.
Pulled up at the house, did my job as I normally would. And I think I did a pretty good job. But as I left, this elderly couple walked me to the door. She thanked me for my time. And just before he closed the door, the chap said, what does that kid know? And the door shut. That was the last thing I heard. And I thought, I know I'm not going to get like they judged me like straight
Right.
away. I'd done a really good job, got back to the office, and my boss said, so when's it coming on? And I told her what had happened. And she just went, well, I suggest you prove you're not a kid before you get there next time. And I just said, Jane, that is brilliant. How do I do that? And she said, and that is the thing you have to figure out.
Ha!
And
Right.
what I said to her, and what I realized over the few days is I said, well, that appointment, I didn't book that appointment. So I'm now not going to go to any appointments unless I have spoken to them, or if somebody's booked it in, I'm going to phone them to introduce myself and have a chat first. And
Right.
as soon as I started to do that, okay, I would turn up to appointments, face-to-face appointments, and one of the first things people would say to me is, wow, you're younger than I expected. And all of a sudden, it was a compliment. It
Right.
wasn't a lack of experience, you're young and obviously don't know what you're talking about. It was, God, you sounded much older on the phone. You obviously know your.
Wow.
So I'd actually managed to. That's, I think, my first stepping stone to becoming the telephone assassin, or realizing that actually talking to people and building a bit of rapport goes a really long way. And if you're trying to create more of a long-term relationship, as and when you meet people, it becomes much easier the more time you've spent engaging with them. And I love talking to people. People love chatting on the phone. All
Right.
right. And they love talking about themselves. So just ask them questions. It's amazing. You can always hear people's heads swelling at the end of the phone when you tell them about the research you've done
Ah,
about them, and how, wow, God, I can see you've worked in that role for over 10 years now, or you've worked your way up through the
yeah.
company, or you've held that level of role for over a decade. God, you must be really good at this, right? Um, yeah, flat. Yeah, like I say, for those people who are scared out there, don't think of it as selling, think of it as helping customers to buy. Okay, you're a proactive expert if you're going to reach out. You're not a cold caller, and your job is to share what your clients are saying about you with other people who are just like them. And if you do that, you'll find that people are interested to find out more, want to know what your test drive is, and you end up helping them to buy rather than trying to convince them or trying to sell to them and convince them to buy.
That's a
Um,
really big point, right? The idea of having a convincer strategy. But what you're saying is, lackability, credibility, and urgency are the three components that you're going for in that phone call. And it takes patience and listening.
yes.
And what
Well,
I'm enjoying so much about our conversation is this understanding of people do business with people they like. They do business with
absolutely. Yeah.
people they trust, right? So
Yep. Yep.
likability, credibility are super
Yep.
important, and you're giving us a formula to
Yep.
create that because back in the day, it was, as you said, hey, here's a list of 100 names. Call, I'm going to give you another one tomorrow and call
Yep.
through it. I just had a guy on the podcast, Morty Davis, a 96-year-old Wall Street icon. This guy is a
Yep.
multi-bajillionaire, like crushed it, 96 years old. And back in the day, that's what he did. He called from
Yep.
7:30 in the morning till 10
Yep.
o'clock at night, 7 days a week, and he was hoping for one or two out of 100.
Yep.
There wasn't any
Absolutely.
technique involved back.
And
That's what they used to teach. And now what you're saying is,
yeah,
like
well,
when I
back
was
then
reading
it
in
was
your book
just.
about
Mhm.
you getting golfing once a week and saying, in 2.5 or 3 hours, calling out for a company, you can have a very good result. So, you were saying sales is part-time in that sense. And I think
Mhm.
what I was getting from it is the quality of what you were doing actually
Yeah.
freed up time and gave you better results than the
Mhm.
quantity of these crappy robodials.
Absolutely, and I think, and some of the younger listeners might hate me for saying this. I think we were a bit. I think the further you go back, the thicker skinned they were, particularly in sales. And that notion of each no is one step closer to your next yes. That was the phrase that went with that list that they
Sure.
gave you. Um, Give that to somebody nowadays who's a lot more aware of their emotional state and is not happy with filling their day with rejection. That
Right.
just sends shudders down their spine, and they're not hungry enough and thick-skinned enough to get to call number 99 to get that sale.
Right.
And technically, like I said earlier on, you one, it's you can automate this process now. Why phone 100 people, email 10,000, phone the 10 that follow the link, right?
Right.
I'd probably go down that route more so. Um, but yeah, that's why I find that a lot of um, sort of my age type of sales managers who try and bring me in and say, "Oh, the young guys are all scared of the phone." It's, well, if you're giving them old-fashioned sales tactics that basically tee them up for a day filled with rejection, then they're going to be scared of the phone.
Stay there a
So
minute,
what?
Ant. Stay there a minute, right? Because we have a lot of people that listen to us that are, Gen Xers, millennials, whatever. And I want to recognize that I grew up with a phone in my hand. It
Mhm.
was attached to the wall and had a cord
Yep.
on it. But, I had to call my now wife, my
Hmm.
woman I wanted to date, and her mom
Yep.
or dad answered the phone, and
I
I had
remember
to
that.
announce who I was and ask if I could speak with her. Versus the technology today that you don't have to go through all that mess and discomfort.
So that may have been a bit of a proving ground, to
Hmm.
people that were forced to use the telephone. How do I then, today, the telephone is a big instrument in business. Getting face-to-face conversations, Zoom calls, phone calls, customer visits is a huge part of how we sell. How do I overcome the inexperience of having had done that? If I'm 32 years old, I didn't do that my whole life. I've been texting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, again, it does become a bit of a numbers game. So you
Okay.
can argue in one hand, everybody has a phone in their hand or their pocket. On the other hand, we can now screen using our voicemails on that call as
Right,
well. We can see who's phoning us because we can see
right,
what number. We can tell if they're a contact in our phone or not. Okay. Which might then influence whether we decide to answer or let that
right.
go to voicemail. Okay. So you kind of got it that way. But you can then look at social media platforms. Do you really want to phone somebody cold, or would you rather send them a little invitation on LinkedIn that's personalized, that tells
Mm,
them why you're interested in connecting? Give it a few days for them to connect, right? Then do a follow-up call, right? So you might break the ice using technology in a slightly different way.
okay.
And back then, when you were given a list of numbers, you were given a list of numbers, whereas now, before you phone anybody, there's no excuse to cold call. And cold calling is phoning somebody you don't know to sell them something, right? Now it should at least be warm. Like, you should have looked them up. You should know how long they've been in their
Absolutely.
job role, what their company actually does,
Hmm.
and have a bit of insight and background information on them. So you should be a lot more prepared and tailored. And this is why I say that you should have more of a wish list of clients you want to work with, that you're going to cultivate relationships with, rather than a database that you're going to go looking for
Huge.
diamonds in the rough. Basically,
Yes.
it's intimidating to see a really big list. But the sort of methods I sort of going back at a couple of minutes here, but with the style of what it is I teach, when it comes to sales, I always say there's three P's. You need to be polite, persistent, and patient. Okay, as long as you follow those three rules, then as long as you're being polite, you can get away with being persistent. And you can be persistent, but you have to be patient, because if you're not, you're going to chase people away or annoy them into not wanting to do business with you. Okay. So quite often, when you introduce yourself and you do your dropping off of your pizza menu, all I'm really looking to do is to find out if you think you'll have a potential future need for my services.
Right.
Okay. And then if so, when do you think you're likely to be hungry for that? Right? That's all I really want to know is, are we potentially going to align in the future? And if so, how far in the future do you see that happening? Brilliant. Okay. I now understand what you want and when you want it. I can try and speed it up, obviously, and there's factors
Right.
that you can do to do that. But that's all your job really is as a
Yeah.
business development person now, is to qualify and warm up.
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, that's fabulous. I think if I can tell folks that are listening, listen to this podcast and then listen to it again and then one or two more times, because I mean, this was like a master class from you. You dropped so many things in here that I've got a
I
page
just
of
wanted it to be
notes.
valuable. I want people to listen to it and kind of go, oh, I like that bit. Oh, I'm gonna try that.
Yeah. Yeah. Take
And
something away, right?
yeah, and I'm quite humble in the fact that when I do deliver training and people come back and they're starting to put it into practice, and they come back with a big smile on their face like I'm a wizard or something, I end up turning back around to them and say, but it's only a subtle tweak to what you were already doing, right? It was just little nuances in the way you say stuff or how you position things. I wasn't getting you to totally start from scratch.
Right.
And actually, once you realize it's those little tweaks that make a big difference at the end, and take out the sting and the nasty bits of the conversation, you
Right.
realize it's a really enjoyable process. Helping people to buy is a really satisfying job.
Wow, that's fabulous. So, as we wrap up, I'm going to say once you listen to this, do me a favor. Make sure you click subscribe. Give us some stars on Apple Podcasts. It helps the message to get out and let other people do it. And I mean, I've got your book here. I always
Mhm.
enjoyed going back and looking at what you teach. So tell me a little bit about what's happening now with the university. How do folks want to find you?
Yeah.
What kinds of things do you want them to be aware of with you?
Well, you just if you Google the telephone assassin, you'll find me everywhere. As you mentioned, I've got a book that I wrote a few years ago, which is great. It's got a lot of techniques that I talk about. What's happened more recently is I launched my Telephone Assassin Online Academy. And it's basically an online resource. It starts with a mini course which explains my sort of 5 step or my 5 conversation steers, that cool structure that I was referring to throughout our chat.
Right.
Once you understand the sort of core structure and the basic principles and etiquette that I teach, there's a little test at the end of it, and then you get access to the full academy. And there's basically advanced techniques in there about objection handling, getting past gatekeepers. There's downloadable scripts and templates, journey mapping exercises, so you can create training aids to try and help build best practice. There's podcasts, there's interviews, there's keynotes, lots of resources. And then every 2 weeks, I'm available for a drop-in group coaching call. You don't have to come, but if you come along, I'll help you with anything that you're trying to work on at the moment, be it something we can go deeper on in the academy. Sometimes you may have had a terrible conversation and we want to unpick what went wrong and how do we stop it happening next time. Or you may even have a big meeting or a lead come through and you want to have that kind of pre-call strategy chat type thing too. But many people who join the academy also like the camaraderie. I do a little bit of accountability. I give people tracker documents that they can track through their CRM system. So yeah, it's just a good way. And it's interesting because there's 2 types of people who tend to join the academy.
Okay.
There's the hardened sales professionals who are good at their job, but they're just looking to up their level just a little notch, and they're just tweaking their process and trying to increase their conversion ratio. So you've got those sorts of people. And then you've got the people who are a bit more phone phobia and a bit more scared on the phone.
Okay.
So anything from solopreneurs to apprentices and people brand new to sales. Again, you can go through at your own speed, but I'm there to kind of help you along the way. Like I say, every fortnight I'm there for a check-in, see how you're getting on, answer any questions, and go from there. So yeah, it's really exciting. I'm loving it because there's such a mixture of people in the group, and at different parts in their journey. But I'm helping a good bunch of people at the moment actually do their case studies. So I've got them to start off with getting their testimonials in from clients. Then we're going to turn them into some beautiful case studies. And then a few of them have actually started dropping them off like pizza menus. I've had one of my clients report 2 opportunities from the pizza menus he dropped off on Friday. So yeah, so anybody wants to get in touch, telephoneassassin.academy is the website. Obviously, find me on LinkedIn as well. Do follow more Frank's podcast as well. I'm a subscriber, so I'll be tuning in. And if you get chance and you're able to try some of this stuff out, please share with me or Frank
Yeah,
what happened. I always
right. We
want to
want
hear
to
what
know.
happens. Yeah, absolutely,
And
absolutely.
well,
But Frank, thank you so much for
oh,
inviting me on. I have to say, we're going to need a virtual coffee as well because it's been great. But I
yeah,
want to chat with you more and pick your brains too.
it's been great, and
Maybe we
the
do
team
another
will reach
episode at
out.
some point.
Yeah, the boys will reach out with the finished product when the time comes and it's dropping. And of course, for our listeners, everything that Anthony mentioned, the academy, his website, etc., all of that'll be in the show notes. There'll be links to everything, his book, etc. So it won't be hard to find. Anthony Stears, I cannot thank you enough. Oh my God, this was a masterclass, man. I took a ton of notes, things that I need to do different, and here I am, 40 something years at it, and I'm picking up new stuff. You are just amazing. I can't thank you enough.
Oh, you are very welcome. Every day's a school day, my friend. And yeah, I have to say, you brought back some brilliant memories as well of
All
Phoenix
right.
back when we first met too. But yeah, hopefully, like you say, there's some good takeaways for people listening in. So yeah, stay tuned and share what happens, people.
All right. Thank you so much.
Ready to take your sales team or event to the next level? Visit franksomma.com to discover how Frank can coach your top performers, deliver a tailored workshop for your team, or captivate your audience with a content-packed keynote at your next event. Frank's best-selling book, B2B is really P2P, is now available on Amazon and Frank's website. Here's a special offer. As a valued listener, mention this podcast when you contact Frank and receive a 10% discount on your first coaching session, keynote, or workshop booking.
That's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Selling in the Age of AI. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to all of the topics we discussed, and of course, to connect with our amazing guests. I have to shout out big love to my production team, Neeks, Angelo, Nico of Digital Presence. You guys rock. If you want your digital presence to explode, check these guys out at digitalpresence.team. And until next time, remember, people can't point and click you. Be the difference maker for your prospects and clients.